In professional speaking, there are really two kinds of speakers. There are keynote speakers, which behind the scenes, bureaus and meeting planners typically call slot fillers. I used to own a bureau, and a speakers bureau, and we call them slot fillers because basically it's like, well, we got a 9 o'clock to 9:45 for the keynote, and then we got 11:30 to 12:15 before the lunch, and they're slot fillers basically. And these are keynote speakers, and that's one type of speaker. Typically motivational speakers, inspirational speakers, those kinds of speakers fit into the slot filler category. The second type of speaker in general is a thought leader speaker. Now this speaker is an in-depth expert on whatever topic they might explore. For example, I spoke on mental toughness training, so I was a thought leader in that space, specifically for pharmaceutical turnarounds for pharmaceutical teams and financial services teams that were underperforming. So as a thought leader speaker, you go into great depth. You're basically selling your interpretation of their problem and then offering solutions or partial solutions to bring to the table. Now, thought leader speakers, it's a big advantage, in my opinion, to be a thought leader speaker because we do usually multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts as opposed to being a keynote speaker where you're getting a speaking fee, whatever your speaking fee is, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever it is. You get a fee and you're unemployed. You get a fee and you're unemployed. You get a fee and you're unemployed. It's a terrible business model. It's not really a business. It's more of a job where you're unemployed unless you're speaking. As a thought leader, we build processes, and these processes go on daily, again, sometimes for years with huge organizations. And so you really want to choose. Most speakers choose to be slot fillers because that's what they know from like National Speakers Association, that kind of thing. There are very few very in-depth thought leaders really even in the business. And so that's what people see. They see the keynote speaker. Bill Gove told me this, the father of professional speaking and my former business partner taught me that he was the first president of NSA, National Speakers. And he told me this years ago. He goes, here's the thing. He said, if you're going to be a keynote speaker, it's very flashy, it's very sexy, it pays well if you get your fee up high enough, but it doesn't really create any value besides the 45 minutes that you speak or hour or whatever the timeline is for the audience. They forget about you in 2 hours, and maybe you come back 3 years later. He says as a thought leader, and the example he used, he said the best thought leader in the history of the business is Larry Wilson. He said he formed Wilson Learning, the second largest training company in the world, as a thought leader, starting with sales teams, and then he went on to do culture change and all kinds of different things. And that company, Wilson Learning, Larry's been gone for years, and Wilson Learning is still a thriving company in like 85 countries around the world because Larry was a thought leader that created all these processes. So what Bill said, he goes, most speakers do one or the other. He said, what I would recommend is you do both. So I did. So I ended up doing about $16 million in keynote speeches or slot filler speeches, right? Luckily, my advantage was, the reason I made more money than most keynote speakers do is I had the advantage of speaking to large audiences. Our average audience at one point was 2,000 or 3,000 people. Whereas my corporate work as a thought leader speaker, my average audience was about 50 people, sometimes 20 people. Management teams, 10 people. So the audiences were really small. Like in corporate, I don't even know the largest one I ever did, but it wasn't probably above 5,000 people, usually a lot smaller. And so when you have a large audience and you have back-end offerings, you can make, $1 million in a speech. And I did that several times, and other speakers as well have done that as well. So there are some advantages there. But for most keynote speakers, they're speaking to small audiences, so they don't have those giant paydays. But those are the two. I recommend if your expertise lends itself to serving both the slot filler or keynote market and the problem-solving market, and you're up to it, do both. I had a lot of friends like Keith Harrell. If you ever remember the speaker Keith Harrell, he was a partner of ours until the day he died, and we worked together for years and years. We did millions of dollars in referral business together. And Keith was a slot filler, the best, certainly in the top 5 I've ever seen in my life. Okay, just phenomenal, but a super smart guy. Some of the keynote speakers, the slot fillers, are not. Let's talk. I'm going to say that. Well, they're not thought leaders. You wouldn't take their advice to the bank. Let's say. Okay, they're really motivated people. A lot of them come from the church, and they're jumping up and down and hugging each other and rubbing each other's shoulders, and it's all good and fun. they're not going to change the way anyone operates a multi-billion-dollar company, let's say, okay, to be nice about it. But they're good for the 45 minutes, and they jump up and down and do their motivational thing, and everybody claps, and everyone has a good time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have the capacity to be a thought leader speaker, that's where the real business is, because it's a real business. I remember, going back to Keith Harrell for a second, when we worked with Keith, I said, Keith, you're smart enough to be a thought leader speaker. He goes, I know, I just don't want to do it. I like doing 45 minutes, I hand it over to you, and you do it for 3 years for the company. And I say, yeah, but we're making 10 times the money. And his fee was higher than my fee. But we were working, he does one speech and we stay there for 3 years, that kind of thing. So there's, the fees don't have to be quite as high. They're still pretty high, but just not as high as someone that at the very top of the keynote business. Those fees can get pretty high. Here's the bottom line for me. I'll tell you the truth. And you decide what you want to do, of course. I'm not telling you which one to do. But the thought leader piece is a real business. The keynote business is just give a speech for 45 minutes. 2 hours later, they've forgotten your name, forgotten what you said, and you're in another baggage claim in another town. You can't remember what town you're in. You're in so many hotels. You got these keys, with you in your pockets for the week, and you don't know which one's which. And it's kind of a nutty way to live. But some people like that, and that's fine if you want to do that. I liked doing it because we had big crowds. It was sexy. It was fun. It's fun to speak to 10, 20,000 people at a time. It's a rush and all the rest of it. It's very prestigious too, I enjoyed it for that. We made a lot of money in the back end, or a fair amount, like I said. But I really got the fulfillment out of being a thought leader, because when you go into a company and they're 200-person sales force, in our case, is at risk of losing their jobs, and 12 months later, they're all heroes. That is very fulfilling, because sales, when we helped them drive sales by $50 million or whatever it would be at the time, that was really fulfilling to me. We made an actual difference. Like, they will never forget the programs we did with Mental Toughness University. I hear that more than anything else. I hear from people from 25 years ago from other countries that email me or message me on social media, whatever, every day, and say, I like the program, I wasn't sure about the program, whatever, but I never forgot that program, because it was an aggressive program. It is an aggressive program. And I'm semi-retired now, but when I was really doing it every day, very aggressive program. That's why it got the results it got. So that was that. But it was very fulfilling to me. Now looking back, as someone semi-retired, I just work with speaker apprentices now. I don't do any marketing or anything like that anymore, or traveling without them. And so just because I want to help bring on the next generation of speakers, I had my chance, and I had a lot of fun, and it was great. And I like being on my boat now on the lake. It's in the backyard. It's a lot of fun. So, but anyway, you just have to decide to do both. Not every topic lends itself to both, but if you can do both, you might enjoy it. I enjoyed jumping back and forth. But if I had to choose one, I'd use a keynote speech to market the thought leader speech and the thought leader business, because that's a real business. So it's something to think about. Thanks for watching.